Welcome, everyone, to the latest episode of Systematic Geekology. I am joined today by my good friend and co-host tonight, our special guest, Adam Bear. How you doing, Adam?
I'm doing well. How are you, sir?
I'm doing okay. Other than the fact that this is like my third recording for the day, so I am a little tired, and I got to go to work after this, but it's all right. All works out, man.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Very good. So, had a little switch up with the system here. YouTube is working fine, but this is actually also going to be for the regular feed as well. So let me actually get into the episode proper, like I'm supposed to be doing,
Okay.
by asking the relevant questions. So, Joshua, you can do whatever the heck you want with this. What terrible ideas are happening within what's supposed to be the flagship title in Marvel Comics? Was the Flash a fitting into the Snyderverse? Tonight, we'll be discussing all that and more on Systematic Geekology. We are the priests to the geeks. I'm your host, Christian Ashley. I'm, of course, joined, like I said earlier, if you're getting this right now, with Adam Bear. Adam is doing well. He's waiting for his kids at VBS right now.
Oh yeah. Yes. I'm just awkwardly waiting outside of a church doing a podcast.
Hey, I'm just grateful you were able to come. We can make this work. Like,
Oh yeah.
it's all good. So, Adam, what we typically do with these, we start with a bit of a lightning round of like stuff we don't really want to focus on, but we do want to bring up. And I, of course, as I will bring that up with Gundam The Witch from Mercury, which is almost done. Latest episode, it just hit. I don't know, Adam, are you a Gundam guy at all? You ever been in that?
I was huge into Gundam Wing and then Mobile Suit Gundam, and I was really excited. I think I kind of got out of it around God Gundam, which is sad because I know Gundam Seed was really good, and I heard really good things about Gundam Seed, and I love big Japanese mechs.
Oh, yes. It's one of my favorite genres as well. But for those of you who've been following along like me with Witch from Mercury, we just had a moment where Suletta finally has learned to stand up for herself against her mother, who has launched Quiet Zero to try and like get back at all the people who wronged her and killed her husband and all this mess that went on. She reunited with Miorine. Good old Guel came in there to help settle their differences. Now it's like they're friends now again. Like, it's leading up to a lot of stuff. I'm still waiting for more pain because there's been plenty of pain. It's a Gundam series after all. So I'm all for that. Adam, do you have anything you want to add to the lightning round?
No, I think you got it covered.
Okay. Well, I'll continue with my next couple then, which is, have you ever heard of From?
No, but I keep seeing stuff. Well, tell me about it.
Yeah, From, essentially, this is the second season right now. There's this town that's somehow people just kind of end up there. Like, it's almost like they're magically or mystically transported to this town where every night after it gets dark, these weird, like almost zombie vampire Draugr kind of figures come out at night and kill them if they're outside and they're not under protection of houses that have like the special talisman that prevent them from entering. So we just had a big reveal. Like, we finally saw one of these creatures killed in one of the past couple of episodes, and now it's repercussions of, okay, can we reproduce this? Can we kill more of them? Like, what do they have to do? It's like, is this thing some big experiment that's like someone is watching us from the outside and manipulating events, and the conspiracies keep on coming? It's kind of like more of a horror Lost. If you ever watched Lost, Adam?
I have watched most of Lost.
Yes.
I got a little bored of it. Got a little bit too contrived for me.
That's fair. I mean, certainly people after 6 seasons, not everything's going to be fresh. So this is the second to last episode for the season 2. So I'm ready for the finale. And then I think we've been confirmed for season 3, which I really hope so. Because if this ends up being another series where a lot of questions are asked and there's not answers, I'm going to get upset.
And that's part of the J.J. Abrams school of philosophy, the mystery box philosophy in filmmaking, and it's a novel idea. I mean, speaking of Lost, because he was one of the producers on Lost. It's an interesting concept, but you see the problem is you got to have a good follow through. You can't just ask questions and then leave us with nothing. I mean, it goes back to that old story construction I lost my train of thought. That
You're good.
old narrative structure called Chekhov's gun, where if you see a gun in Act One hanging on the wall, you expect it to be used in Act Three. It's the
Yes.
same thing. So yeah, I can see your frustration, but the show sounds really cool.
I'm enjoying it. It's got some really good characters. It suffers from that one thing of like people don't talk to each other enough, and like they're all experiencing these weird things, but like maybe they'll talk to one other person about it, but not like, hey, like
Mm-hmm.
let's like collectively meet as a town and say, oh, I saw these weird looking kids the other day, and oh no, I'm having these visions. Like let's actually discuss these things because obviously crazy things are going on, so no one's really going to think you're that crazy. But you know what?
Mm-hmm.
I'm in it to win it. It's a lot of fun. That's from last part of the lightning round that I have is the we knew Ultraman Blazer was going to be the next Ultraman series, but we didn't know that they were going to be having an official dub for the first time in forever. Which I don't know. You said you were a little bit in the anime. Do you know who Johnny Young Bosch is?
I don't. I don't.
He was one of the original Power Rangers. Excuse me, no,
Oh,
the second generation, actually, if I remember correctly.
yeah.
And he got into anime dubbing real early on because he's done Trigun and Bleach and stuff like that. He's going
Mm-hmm.
to be the main voice of our main character for Blazar. I'm a big Ultraman guy. Like you talk about like giant mechs and stuff. I love seeing giant tall guys beat up giant monsters, kaiju, all day long. Like it just tickles that little child, part of my brain that goes, yes, this is fun.
It's funny how these certain trends happen in Japan, and yet, Americans, as Americans, we love these trends, but yet we don't have American equivalent for it. I don't even think BattleTech, which I think is the closest to the big giant robot thing, I don't even think that's American.
I think it's based off of Japanese properties, if I remember correctly.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's it for our lightning round. We're going to be moving on to the main focuses of our discussion today. Our main topics are the current Amazing Spider-Man run done by Zeb Wells and John Romita Jr. and a couple of other artists who've been here along the way, and The Flash, which just released not too long ago. So, Adam, how you mentioned before we recorded that you were familiar-ish with what was going on in the comics right now. How much do you know?
Well, I have my I'm kind of a second generation comic book fan. My dad was huge in the comics and had a huge collection, like multiple tens of $1,000s worth of collection he sold off some years back. So I've kind of, for lack of a better phrase, grandfathered into it, but I haven't been keeping track of it as much, especially in the later 2000s. I was really into it in the early 2000s, but I haven't been keeping track of it too much.
That's totally fair. Like we were saying before we recorded, like it's real hard to get into this stuff right now. Like I just got started in reading action comics again for the first time. I'm still not caught
Mm.
up to the current one. I'm only like a couple issues behind, but a friend of mine on Twitter at 75 opposite hedgehog. If you're out there listening, thank you for all you do. Gave me a list of like, hey, here's this arc that just happened in Superman. You're going to love it. Read it, loved it, caught up with that. I'm way more positive on that than I am for what's happening in Spider-Man right now. So I air this because after the issue before that just released, something happened. A lot of things happened that I was really upset with. And I almost called Joshua and said, hey, I'm going to do a live recording and I'm going to trash this series and all these terrible things. But I said, nope, I can't do this knee-jerk reaction. I need to be better. I need to be better with how I handle my anger over these fictional characters. So Adam, if there's something along the way, go ahead.
Walk me through what's going on. Tell me about it. Let's discuss it. Let's hash it out.
So,
you being someone who's like deep into it, and me kind of an outside observer. Let's hash this out.
Okay. So this is our current run is about 2 behind a run that wasn't perfect, but it handled Peter and Mary Jane and everyone a lot better. It was Nick Spencer's run. Like I said, it wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I miss it more every day because you had them, they were getting back together as a couple after what happened in One More Day over a decade ago. It still irks me that that's the thing. You had Spider-Man starting to be respected more by the superhero community. He was getting better with his supporting cast. And then the Beyond storyline happens where you had a bunch of different writers come on. Ben Reilly became the main hero, which I was all for that. until they ruined his character just so Peter could come back, and they turned him into a villain, which we'll discuss that in a little bit too. So we start with Wells. Wells, before this, has written some of my least favorite Spider-Man stories, that being his Shed storyline where the lizard kills his family, and it's implied to like eat them and assault one of his let's see, I think she was like TA or something like that. And then you have the storyline that is very important to what's happening right now, where he and Wolverine fought this like guy who worshiped this Mayan god called Way Up, and that it was fine for what it was. But since no one else cared about that character but him, since he's the main writer, he can do whatever he wants. So he reintroduces Way Up. We start the very beginning of this series with Peter and Mary Jane no longer dating. He was about to propose to her. We don't know why. It's a very big mystery box situation, like you mentioned earlier, where it starts with Spider-Man in a destroyed kind of costume in York, Pennsylvania, where there's this massive explosion and it says, "What did Peter do?" It's like, oh no, what could he have done? Well, we don't find out until about 20 some issues into this, which thank God they released 2 a month, because I really would be mad if we were still on a regular comic schedule. But Adam, my friend, so we find out that through what Peter did, his friends no longer like him. Like Johnny Storm and the Fantastic Four are mad at him because he stole something from them. We don't know why until later on. He beat up Captain America, so the Avengers don't like him right now. We learn why later on. They're very all contrived reasons. Let's see. He and Mary Jane are no longer a couple, and she's now with this new man, Paul. That, by the way, we learn in a letter, like recap, not the actual story, that they married off screen. And she has these 2 children that look suspiciously like the both of them, that are way too old for a 6-month gap for them to exist. So how is that possible? Mystery box. I'm getting there. Sorry. My anger is rising.
I can see it. I can see the anger boiling in your face.
I should also probably move my slide over to Spider-Man. Yeah, there we go. That's going to make me happier seeing that image. So he and MJ have broken up. He and his supporting cast no longer like him. Like, he's got Aunt May angry at him because he's being so flaky and all over the place. Like, the only person who really likes him right now is Norman Osborn, which, by the way, I don't know if you've heard, in a storyline I actually really enjoyed. The Sin Eater came and used his gun, which like removes people's sins from them, and hit Norman Osborn with it. So he is now someone whose sins have been removed from him, and now he's got this new morality he's never really had before, and like wrestling with that, which I do like what Wells has done with that. Let me say, compliment sandwich right there. But Norman is like the only person Peter has as a confidant. So he's working for him at Oscorp now as like an intern, not an intern, like slightly above intern, whatever. Yeah, that's so stupid. And so we find out along the way, Peter and Mary Jane were working as a couple there. Then Way Up and his minion Rabin appeared. So I think it was just Rabin at that point in time. Robin. It's Rabin, however the heck you pronounce that.
Yeah.
And took them into this dimension where Way Up was, and all this science involving strange quantum math and all this happened, and time moves faster in there in this reality, or this pocket dimension, or whatever heck it is. So Peter and Mary Jane find Paul, this strange new guy in this reality, team up with him, create this device that's going to send them back, but they're attacked by Rabin in the midst of this, Rabin, whatever. And Mary Jane was going to be the one Peter sent back home, but she sends him back, which causes a massive explosion in York, Pennsylvania, which thankfully there was no one else around. So, Adam, I ask you, my friend, would you, after being in the midst of this explosion, take off your costume and bury it in the dirt? So when the authorities come along, they go, Spider-Man's costume is here. Maybe he was behind this.
I can't think of a reason why you would just bury your costume in the dirt.
It's so Peter does that. And sorry, I'm tickled too because Nicola, one of the editors, said someone said I was pirating the comics to read them, and he said Peter Parker would never steal. And in this issue, we have Peter Parker stealing someone's clothes to pass off since he got rid of his costume to get to New York. And then later on in this same issue, like he steals from the Fantastic Four so he can build a device to get back to Mary Jane. And instead of talking to them, when Johnny and the Thing both and say, "Hey, buddy, like Captain America told us like something weird and funky happened in Pennsylvania. Yeah, we need you to wait for a little bit." But Peter, instead of saying, "Hey, time is of the essence. Mary Jane is stuck there. It could be years before I get back to her. I want to get there as soon as possible," decides to fight the Human Torch and the Thing, steals from them, then goes to Norman Osborn for help. Instead of Tony Stark or Hank Pym or Amadeus Cho or anyone else.
Yeah.
Goes to him. And they're able to build a suit that sends Peter back. But in the process, Peter beats up Captain America with his own shield, which, to be frank, like Peter could win that fight because he's stronger than Captain America. But still, like, he doesn't attempt to talk to him because time is of the essence. You could just say that. These are your friends you've worked with for 10 some years in comic book time. But I digress. So eventually gets back to Dimension, but it's been several years, Adam.
No.
Mary Jane has moved on with Paul, and there's these two mysterious kids they found. Are they her biological children? No. They just randomly find them one day in that dimension.
That's such a ridiculous thing. Hey, look, here are these two kids. Well, let's just adopt them. Okay.
So Sheena's now playing wife to Paul, who, by the way, essentially Stockholmed her into liking him this whole time. And somehow she gave up on Peter despite knowing who this man is and how much he loves her. But no, this guy, Paul, he's the one. She's going to stick by him. Sorry. I'm trying to de-escalate.
If I can interrupt, I mean, it's so indicative to what's wrong with storytelling right now. Because we as a generation, and even though like I looked up the author, he's in his 40s. We're part of this generation that was so blessed to have such well-written things that came before us, and instead of learning from those things and learning what made them so good, we're so obsessed with subverting expectations, or we get these ideas in our heads and we're like, okay, I want to accomplish this because I think it will be cool, or I think it'll be interesting. Never mind that it doesn't make sense. Never mind that you can't logically get from one point A to point B. It just sounds like an interesting idea. And author, when I was a theater major. I grew up in that artistic kind of realm, and they just don't teach the same process of developing stories and developing characters like they used to. And then we don't take that critical eye and be like, okay, let me critically analyze what made the 90s Spider-Man so good. Let me critically analyze that and then try to fold that into new modern ideas or even new interesting storytellings. They just kind of throw it out all the window and be like, well, I want to do what I want to do because I think it sounds cool.
Yes, I 100% agree. And we'll get to that later on with some of the questions I have to ask. But thank you for that interruption. I needed that just to breathe for a second.
Yeah.
Let the anger flow down a little bit.
Slow down. It's just a comic book. It's just a comic book.
There you go. It's only my favorite character of all time.
But he's such a good character. Have you seen not to sidetrack us, but have you seen Across the Spider-Verse yet?
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking about that in a little bit. We can.
Yeah.
I won't even go there. Okay. Go on. Continue.
So they come back into the regular world. Mary Jane is married to Paul with these two children that are on their own, even though they look really similar to them. So, bait and switch there. No one likes Peter anymore. Not his superhero friends, not his family, even though Aunt May would literally do anything for this boy. Yeah, whatever. Norman Osborn, his only friend. What reality is that in? Well, apparently 616. Yeah. So we find Peter along the way is just dealing with his Spider-Man stuff, and he ends up fighting the Vulture. Now, Adam, if you had to guess, there's a moment where Norman Osborn has made a new suit for Peter Parker. He said, "Hey, I'm going to give it to you for free." What
Mhm.
villain would you have guessed beating up Spider-Man that would have had him call Norman Osborn and say, "Please give me the suit. I'm going to die if you don't"?
I have no clue. I can't even imagine. I'm terrified to guess.
I mean, you would think it'd be someone like maybe Carnage or the Vulture. Excuse me, not the Vulture,
Yeah.
or Doctor Octopus or something like that. Someone that has matched with Peter before and is a physical threat
Mm.
to him. Would you expect it to be the Vulture?
Not the traditional vulture, that's for sure.
And would you like to know why the Vulture is mad at him?
Please, please, I've got to know.
Okay, so the Vulture is mad because in the Miles Morales comics, it is revealed that the Vulture has a granddaughter who he made a suit for. She has turned into a superhero named Starling, and she and Miles dated for a little bit. And she has found out that her grandfather Adrian Toomes is the Vulture and has killed people in the past, and she's mad at him. So, did Spider-Man tell her that? No, that's publicly available information. So
Yeah.
he gets angry at Spider-Man for the fact that he is known as a murderer, and so then attempts to murder Spider-Man.
It's such terrible character writing. It's just,
So, so somehow he overpowers Spider-Man, and Norman Osborn has to come in to save the day. It's bad. It's bad, Adam.
oh gosh.
Okay, so let's move to Chasm. You know who
Oh,
Chasm is?
okay. He's a symbiote, isn't he? Some sort of, isn't he?
Well, no, because
Okay.
remember how I said Ben Riley turned into a villain?
Yes.
This is Ben Riley now.
Okay.
Which, gotta say, cool looking suit. I'll give him
Yeah.
that.
I dig the blue and the purple.
Yeah.
Or it's kind of like a bluish purple
Yeah.
and
So
green.
Ben is, obviously with clone issues. It's like, am I the real one? Blah, blah, blah. That was a clone saga.
Hmm.
He's suffering with it
Hmm.
again, even though he's overcome it like 50 times before now. Has decided, like, I'm not the real one. I'm going to do my own thing. So he goes to Limbo to ally with Madeline Pryor, the Goblin Queen, who has been resurrected in one of Wells' other books, which was actually pretty good, Hellions, as a gift to Havoc, who had a thing for her. But she decides, I'm going to have revenge on the X-Men, and Ben Riley decides, I'm Chasm now. Ooh, I'm an edgy 90s anti-hero right now, and I'm going to fight. I'm going to get Peter and get my memories back because I got to be the real Spider-Man. So they have a whole crossover event between Spider-Man and the X-Men where they barely interact with each other. And Ben remains a villain. It's awful. It's terrible. It's not worth anyone's time. But now we get to the part where Joshua is going to probably leave the stream that he's watching right now, I know. How familiar are you with Kamala Khan?
Oh gosh,
Miss
Kamala
Marvel?
Khan. Yeah, I'm familiar enough to make my teeth hurt.
Well, not to rub anyone the wrong way, Kamala is Josh's one of favorite Marvel characters right now. And I rather like her too. I think sometimes she can be a bit overused. I wasn't the biggest fan of the Disney Plus episodes that they had. It could have been a lot better, but it was good enough. But Kamala has been here this entire time, working as an intern for Oscorp, which is weird because, as I was talking with Joshua earlier today, I don't think she's ever really expressed that much of an interest in science. But you find the reason she's there is because she saw Norman helping Norman in Jersey because they had to be there for some reason because that's where she's at, and it decided to infiltrate Oscorp to watch him because he's a bad guy.
Okay.
And in the midst of this, like Raven and Wyatt come back onto Earth, and Peter's protecting Mary Jane and Paul, and Miss Marvel comes to help him. The Fantastic Four come to help. Captain America comes, and do they have a conversation about, hey, we probably should have talked to each other better, or like, we should discuss these things? No, they go, hey, we're good. Which, I mean, sure, would like them to forgive each other if these things happen, but that's not That's a writer saying, "I want this done over and done with."
Yeah, it's not very good writing.
Yeah. So what happens is while they're attacking this big thing, I can't remember the exact thing that's happening. Miss Marvel, one of her lesser known powers is that she can shapeshift, which she has very rarely done.
Mm.
And they know that Raven is targeting Mary Jane because of some mystical mumbo jumbo that if he kills her, like he'll gain like the powers of the Mayan god of chaos or whatever. And
Plot
yeah,
device.
yeah,
That's
of
the
course. So
MacGuffin.
what Kamala does is she shapeshifts into Mary Jane, gets killed by Raven, not in her own book, by the way, or in a crossover event,
Mm-hmm.
but as a bit character, like she's appeared like less than 2% of this comics run. Someone did the math, and we're all supposed to feel sad, which I am. I don't want to see her dead. This is probably their way of turning her into a mutant instead of an inhuman, so they can have that MCU synergy. I'm not big on that, but whatever. So that's where we're currently at right now. Adam, thank you for listening to me rant.
I'm here for emotional support.
I appreciate it. So, anything you want to say before we get into the questions?
Oh my goodness. You know, as you're telling me about this, I remember reading some articles about this and watching the backlash to it. Now, I'm not a huge Kamala fan, just because I feel like she's one of those characters that were written to be like, hey, look at this character. Don't you think it's cool? Don't you think they're cool? They're supposed to be really, you know what I mean? If I'm making sense, and I can see why people like her, but I never clicked with her. So like, even if she had died, I wouldn't have been sad about it. But for people who are a fan of the character, for people who do have invested time and energy into liking the character, I really understand how frustrated people can be and disappointed from that.
Oh yeah,
To not just kill her off, but kill her off in a story where she has so little impact of. It's like, for a character that Marvel has put so much effort into trying to make a thing, you know what I mean? That's just so like, oh,
it's unnecessary.
it's
So we do have
unnecessary.
some listener comments. Sorry, I did not see them because I had a Word document over that, Joshua.
Oh,
He says, I doubt they do that in comics personally. There's no real need. I don't know, man. I'm way more cynical on this. I think that's exactly what they'll do to make her a mutant. I hope that's not the case because I'd rather she would be an inhuman and all that. It differentiates her. But that's where we're at. Joshua also says that Kamala is the best Marvel hero since Cap. That is certainly an opinion, and that's Josh's opinion, which he is free to have.
Well, she's in the comic book. She's basically like a Reed Richards, kind of very Reed Richardsy, right? She's stretchy and plastic almost.
In that sense,
in that sense. And I know that she's an Inhuman. And explain to me why her becoming a mutant is gonna how is that gonna like change anything? I'm a little confused by that.
Well, what they did in the MCU version is instead of making her an Inhuman because their series bombed completely.
Oh yeah. Oh, you continue your thought, but I'm
yeah. So they made her a mutant instead because they're going to introduce them later on. Whenever that X-Men movie comes out, like it was supposed to come out like 2 years from now, but I think it's even further back. With all that's happened.
MCU.
So what comics have done is that they're a dying medium overall. It's not what I like to hear, but sales are going down. People's interest is going down. So they're trying. Yeah. They're trying to like synergize the MCU because people care about this, so maybe they'll care about the comics too if it's the exact same. So Joshua also says it doesn't do anything to make her a mutant. It's unnecessary but cool for the movies. He also agreed with what I had to say.
Well, and the thing that I like about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is the MCU needed to do this from the beginning. He referred to the MCU as Marvel as Universe 19999 or something like certain amount of nines. Yes. And so characters can have different origin stories in the different universes, and that makes sense. And I'm cool with that.
Yes.
That was my thought. I just thought that
Okay.
was cool.
All right.
That was my thought. I thought that was they can justify that change because it's in a different universe.
There you go. All right. So I have a couple questions before we move on to the Flash.
Okay.
If a company realizes that a certain product will sell regardless of what they do, which Spider-Man consistently sells near the top of the list, uh, like what can we as consumers do to handle this scenario?
Well, I think we need to show them our opinions with our purchasing power. I mean, the reality is the both DC and Marvel, they decided that they were going to go along with the bandwagon, and they were going to focus on stories and arcs that uh, they thought would be interesting or cool because they were following a certain pop culture trend, and it wasn't. It damaged the brand and damaged what they can do, and you see the decline in the comic book sales because and the problem is with like the MCU is they're now repeating all of those same mistakes. It's like, oh yeah, well in 2000, uh, in the early 2000s, they introduced Lady Thor and Lady Thor's comet tanked. Well, let's bring her into the MCU. That will end well. They're not learning from their mistakes, and the best thing I think we can do is just be like, well, you can write whatever you want and you can make the stories whatever you want. And just because I've liked the character in the past doesn't mean I have to like it now. It doesn't mean I have to indulge you. That's kind of my philosophy on it.
Well said. I mean, I've not given them a cent for this entire run. I have a friend who's like one of those doesn't care; they just buy things. So
Mm-hmm.
I've been able to read it that way. I'm not giving a cent until I promised I would never give them a cent until they restored the marriage, and that's been like
Mm.
a 15 some year boycott.
Yeah. Well, and part of the issue with the comic book industry is you got to think what comic books started getting popular in the 80s, 1970s, 80s. You have to remind me of my comic book history, but you think there was at least 30 plus solid years of story. It's like imagine a TV show lasting that long.
Oh
And I
God,
know they've restarted it, and I know they've gone back to the beginning and stuff and have tried to do other stories with it, but it's like, is this the same Peter Parker from the original run, or is this a different Peter Parker
it's
that
the
they've
same one.
restarted? So it's like after 30 years, how do you keep the story interesting? And the problem is it's an effort and futility. And some, I pause, rewind. I think about some of my favorite TV shows. This is a bit of a sidetrack, but it's important. The
Yeah.
TV show Scrubs. I love Scrubs. Not everyone likes it. I loved
Yes.
it. If you watch season 1 to season 8, it's got a really good beginning and middle and end. You've got a story arc, you've got characterization. Maybe some parts of the seasons were better than others, but the show ends with this magnificent ending that completely connects with the overall themes and ideas of the show. And then they slapped another season on top of it. They slapped season 9. And it's just like, as much as these companies want to make money, and they're valid for making money, you've also got to end it. Otherwise, you're just leaving a bad taste in your mouth. It's like eating the same bowl of spaghetti every single day for 30 years. It may have been good the first 25 years, but after a while, it's going to start to get a little stale.
Well said. I mean, you kind of answered my other question there in that regard, so we don't need to worry about that. But they need to be able to experiment with characters in ways that make sense to that character.
Yes.
And it's infuriating when a writer just says, well, I'm going to do what I want versus what fits who this person is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's a ton in there. Last thing from Joshua here. Like, according to the movies, the MCU is 616. So that's not confusing at all. Well, I think that's one of the shots that Sony was taking at them in Across the Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
Is by calling it 19999. Because like comics is 616. No one can say anything else. Like, that's how it is. So anything else on this topic, Adam?
Well, it's kind of an added topic, but to James Gunn's credit, and I'm really curious to see what's going to happen to the DCU, because he's basically from what I understand, he's wiping the slate clean, and this
Yes.
is kind of a good segue because we're going into the Flash. He's wiping the slate clean, and everything's going to be connected into the same universe. And there's going to be the primary universe, and there's going to be the Elseworld, which is going to be any of the non-mainstream kind of thing. And I think that's a really intelligent. I think organizing it is a really intelligent thing to do because all these fandoms, they're so big now. It's so hard to keep track of them all, and it's so hard to
Yes.
engage with. Like, I wanted to go back and read some of the old Spider-Gwen comic books, but it's really hard to know. It's really hard to find a beginning spot, and really hard to get into a story that's been, already several years in the making, kind of thing. So, to James Gunn credit, I will give him credit. Unifying all of this is probably to its betterment.
Yes. Well, speaking of the last film in the
Oof,
Snyderverse, we talk about the Flash. Now,
oof.
before we actually get into the film proper, let's get the worst stuff out of the way. Ezra Miller and their destructive tendencies have marred this film. There's really no way around that. Like, before we talk about the film proper, how can one separate the actor from their product, or should we even do so?
Well, I've studied acting. I'm really into acting, um, and I can, it, you can separate the art from the artist. It is very possible. The problem is Ezra Miller is not that good of an artist, so it's hard to separate that out because it's just like you behave this way and you do these things and you don't even do a good job in something that's supposed to be a craft. It just leaves a bad taste in your mouth.
Yeah, I, I agree completely. Like, they did a fine job in this film. Um, it's it's okay. Their acting in this movie, like, movie overall, like, I'm more positive on than some of the other Snyderverse films. But let's actually get into it. What do you want to discuss about the Flash before we get into anything else?
Oh, how disappointing and what a missed opportunity Michael Keaton was. I mean, it was good. He was good. He does a great job, but they just they ruined the opportunity for a dedicated Michael Keaton, Batman Dark Knight Returns kind of storyline because they put him in this
Ooh,
Flash movie. I mean, how cool it would be to see a story, and I've thought about this in great length. How cool it would have been to see a movie where it's set in the time period that it would be now. Michael Keaton's no longer Batman because Robin and Oracle and the other Bat friends have kind of taken over, and Batman finds himself getting into a mystery or a situation that he left unresolved or something he got unresolved. And so you're following Michael Keaton through this kind of like introspective of who he is now and what is his purpose now that he's no longer Batman, and been getting pulled back into the cape and cowl because of this problem he left unsolved. How cool would a story like that? Well, that's out the window because they did this. You know
yeah.
what I mean?
So, as far as this film itself is concerned, I don't like that they started with Flashpoint. I would rather, if you were going to do this, actually explore the character of the Flash first.
Definitely.
Uh, because what DC did is they said, "Oh, well, Marvel's doing well. They just did the Avengers. Well, let's work to the
Mm,
Justice League as fast as possible." Instead of
yeah.
forgetting the fact that they didn't start with the Avengers. They started with Iron Man, Hulk, Captain America, Thor, so on and so forth, building these characters up so when they show up in the Avengers, we know who they are and what they're about. Like, granted, Superman and Batman are two of the biggest properties in comics the world knows. Like, most people know their origins. So, but still, no, really, everyone knows who Wonder Woman is. They may know
Mm,
like the gist, but not like who she is. Not as many people know about who Cyborg is unless they watch Teen
mm,
Titans or something like that. Like, no one really. I didn't care about those characters when they showed up in Justice League
mm,
because I hadn't been given a reason to.
yeah.
So what the Flash does is it gives me Barry Allen after I've seen him in Justice League, and like a couple cameos elsewhere. Like I did enjoy the cameo in Peacemaker, but at the end of the day, it's like, well, who is Barry Allen? Well, apparently he's this guy that just changes the multiverse because he misses his mom. Yeah, sure, that's good for Barry Allen in comics because I know who he is.
Yeah.
But this movie, I've got next to nothing. They try and build up on him, but it doesn't work. As far as the actual story is concerned, I did enjoy it. Like I said, as far as like the DCEU is concerned, this is not like near the top of the list for me, but I'm more positive on it than other things. I enjoyed seeing Michael Keaton's Batman back in action. I enjoy, I forget the name who played Supergirl in this film. She did a good job. It was okay to see Zod again. I wasn't big on him in Man of Steel.
Yeah.
Well, how about you?
I think it was a really good idea, and I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that it was a good idea.
Yeah.
It's a really cool concept of what if Barry did something and then couldn't fix it. I think that's a cool idea. But again, you're right. We didn't have a proper origin story. We didn't really get to explore Barry individually. And my problem with Ezra is I felt like he wasn't playing Barry Allen. I felt like he was playing Impulse almost, like 90s run Impulse. You know, this kind of like buffoonish, childish, and maybe I'm unfamiliar with Barry early run, but I felt like I felt like I didn't feel like Ezra was a good choice in his casting to begin with. You know, and I understand why Zack Snyder did it. He wanted a parallel compared to the buffness and macho-ness of Bruce Wayne and Batman and Superman and Aquaman. You can't just have a whole line of these huge chads coming in there. So they wanted a contrast, but I didn't feel like I felt like it was too much off of the deep end. And I kind of blame the animated series for that, because we see Michael Rosenbaum, who did the voice of the Flash from the animated series, the really popular animated series in the late 90s, early 2000s. He was playing Wally West. Yes. And Wally West, in my mind, has always been that kind of buffoonish, competent, but buffoonish, silly, more taking it less seriously than Barry Allen did. And that's why I think, as much as I wasn't a huge fan of the TV show Flash in the later seasons, Grant Gustinson, if I pronounced his name right, I felt like he did a really good job because he was always competent.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And I didn't feel that with Ezra. Grant Gustin? Yeah.
Yeah. I enjoyed the early Flash as well, TV series. So that's probably what most people would think of. I think at our age, we're definitely going to think Justice League before anything else, like you mentioned. Mm-hmm. So that would be Wally West instead. Barry Allen is not quite more. He's not a jokester, but he is a little more serious and competent as like a forensic scientist and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So we didn't get to see a lot of that in this film. It's all over the place, which is to its detriment. But I do still enjoy this film. Let me put it that way.
I think it's got a good skeleton. You know what I mean? I think it's got a really good backbone and really foundation. And I think it's got some really good ideas that are worth exploring, but it didn't quite earn the right to explore them. I think the big comparison, of course, is No Way Home, Spider-Man No Way Home. That's the big comparison. Like, why does the Flash not work where No Way Home did? They're both trying to capitalize on some member berries. They're both trying to they're both playing with this multiverse kind of thing. Well, in one case, the MCU has earned it. They've developed Tom Holland's Peter Parker as a character.
Yes.
So that he doesn't need to share the screen with another version of himself. He can share the screen with Andrew and with Toby, and it actually extends their stories further.
Yes.
Especially Andrew's. It expands to his universe further. it doesn't really do that with Keaton. Keaton, I mean, you could have put, and they did end up. Spoiler alert: they did end up putting George Clooney, and it's like you could have done George Clooney, you could have done Val Kilmer without him saying a single word, and it would have all been the same. You know
Yes.
what I mean? That's not true of No Way Home. The story hinged on those two characters coming in and being there for him and offering him wisdom. The No Way Home, if you took them out of it, would have been a lesser story without the two of them being in it.
I think that's a good comparison to make, a fair comparison between these two films, because there are similarities between them. Like for the Flash, like they get into that whole, well, they wanted Keaton in the film, number one. So they had the
Mm,
right reason for why it's him, even though logically speaking, he shouldn't be that old Batman in this universe. Where it's kind of like, well, there's like this quantum entanglement stuff, blah, 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 and all these spaghetti noodles. And he's Batman instead of Ben Affleck. It's like, okay, sure. I know why you wrote that in the film, just so you could have Keaton there instead
yeah,
of exploring a different concept or ending up in Keaton's world instead of what we got. Which I did enjoy what they did with Supergirl being there instead of Clark, because that kind of makes me believe that in the proper Snyderverse, she's the one who went off course, and Clark came to Earth instead, or Kal-El, I should say, in that case.
mm,
So
mm,
if this had continued, I would have liked to have seen her in some way.
yeah,
Because there's the possibility that's a sequel hook right there. It's like, oh no, her pod's still out there. Barry could tell Clark, like, hey, I know where she is. Let's go find her. That'd be great. But like,
yeah.
they rushed her story because they had to devote all this time elsewhere. I did like the interactions between the different Barrys on screen. It got a little too quippy sometimes. It got a little too MCU-ish
Mm-hmm,
every now and then for its
mm-hmm,
own good. But you get the older Barry who's not like totally serious, but has learned some of the responsibility, versus the one who's
mm-hmm,
never had to learn the responsibility a day in his life and
mm-hmm.
slowly becomes a hero over the course of the film. But it's just missing something. Like I said, it's got the skeleton right there. We just need to get the muscles and tendons and everything else.
Well, and I mean, to bring in the masterclass that is across the Spider-Verse.
Mm.
I mean, their ability to do the multiverse concept so well and so impactfully is just they it's just night and day. And it's like, I think that's the issue. It's not just you have this bare bones story, but they just don't know how to execute it, and they don't want to look at movies like, you know, Into the Spider Verse, which
Mm-hmm.
I think is the first pinnacle, like the gold standard of multiverse storytelling. They didn't want to learn from that and learn how to incorporate that all. They just kind of, they wanted to like I said, they like I said earlier, they have these ideas in their head, and they're like, okay, we need to make these ideas work even no matter what.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, just trying to justify everything there. Well, Adam, I hate to
Well,
start cutting this a little short. Is there anything else you want to say? Because I got to get to work fairly soon.
uh no, we definitely need to have a cross the Spider Verse conversation
Oh
sometime
yeah.
now.
If
Oh,
you're all interested, we do have that up not only on our regular feed, but also on YouTube as well. If you want to see the conversation Will, Pablo, and I had. Pablo, unfortunately,
I'm
couldn't
gonna
be
have
here
to.
this time around. I definitely enjoyed that movie immensely, but unfortunately, work is a thing. So,
Yep.
Pablo, God dang it, Adam.
You called me Pablo and Adam.
Which one of the topics we discussed today was your top recommendation? Definitely not the one given by the person who called your name wrong.
Oh, top recommendation. I think the Flash. I think the Flash. If you don't see it in theaters, I think it's worth a watch. If you're interested in storytelling, if you're interested in character construction, I think it's really interesting to watch and compare it to, for lack of a better word, it's better. Compare it to No Way Home, compare it to Across the Spider-Verse, and really break down what works and what doesn't, and what we liked and what we don't liked. I think it's worth. I think it's worth seeing in that way. And yeah, Michael Keaton is just always a win. So
Oh yeah. You did a fantastic job. I'm also recommending The Flash. I would never recommend anyone to read this current Zeph Wells run of Spider-Man. I don't hate someone that much. I hate myself a little because I keep reading it somehow. But that's that. So, guys, thank you for listening to this special episode of What's New. Thank you, Adam, for guest hosting with me. With me is how I should pronounce that word correctly.
mhm.
So if you're interested in more of our stuff, we're going to continue doing these to YouTube as well and on the regular feed for the podcast. Join us on Discord to hang out with us, talk about what you're interested in. If you had an opinion about The Flash or about Marvel Comics as bad as what Joshua normally does, just let us know. We have a comics channel there. We have movies channels there. Also, continue watching us on YouTube. Subscribe there. We'll have more content heading your way. If you want to join us, become a member of our Patreon, feel free. We're always welcome to more people going out that way. But remember, above all else, we are all a chosen people, a geekdom of priests.